The UN has warned of a rat hole of retaliation. What options would Iran be considering right now?
Well, as we've been hearing, there are any number of options open to Iran, but those options remain limited. There's no doubt that its arsenal of ballistic missiles has been severely hampered by the continuing Israeli attacks, its ability to defend itself against those attacks. And so if you're talking about what we would call symmetrical warfare, then, Iran has limited options. It's also limited by what it wants to get out of any retaliation. It's in a position where it has said that it will retaliate against the United States for this attack, but probably wants to do so in a way that does not risk the United States ramping up its retaliation. This is exactly what the UN Secretary-General is talking about, the risk of this just escalating into retaliation for retaliation. Other than that, there are, as we say, there are any number of options. People are talking about cyber warfare attacks. They're talking about potential terror attacks in other parts of the world against targets that are outside that theatre of war through Iranian proxies. Probably the one that we'll be watching most closely today and in the coming days is whether there's any action in the Strait of Hormuz, which, as people have probably been hearing, a shipping channel that carries about 20% or up to 30% of the world's oil from out of those Gulf-producing countries out into the world. It'll be interesting to watch the Asian markets when they open today to see what happens to the price of oil, because it's a genuine threat. It's something that the Iranians have said that they are considering doing. It's not easy to do, and it would itself invite retaliation, presumably from the United States, to open up that shipping lane again. So far, we have no indication about what Iran's retaliation might look like.
Has the Strait of Hormuz been closed off and shut off before? Is there any historical precedence there?
The most recent historical precedent is the other side of the Gulf, the Red Sea. And so that was an Iranian proxy. The Houthi rebels in Yemen did attack what they described as shipping that was connected to Israel and to the United States. And they very effectively managed to hamper, severely restrict shipping in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. That extended beyond the Israeli and United States linked shipping. It was basically all shipping was under threat. And so what that meant was ships could no longer go through the Suez Canal. They had to go the long way around Africa. It became incredibly expensive for ships to get insurance. Now that, as I say, was dealt with by strikes from the United States, who hit the Houthis. Those attacks stopped. But that could be a blueprint for what we see in the Strait of Hormuz.
Ben, is there a diplomatic solution that would be a face-saving way for Iran to negotiate than retaliate militarily?
It's interesting to think about. I mean, if you have a look at how this happened, the United States and Iran were in negotiations when Israel launched its assault against Iran. The United States was calling on Iran to come back to the table, and then launched its strike, United States strike against those Iranian nuclear facilities. There are big questions about the legality, not just of the Israeli operation, but also of the American operation. And that then opens up further questions about whether the US, or how much the US, has damaged itself as a good faith broker in any type of negotiation. Because essentially the United States was at the table talking to the Iranians, presumably knowing, or perhaps worse, not knowing, that the Israelis were about to undermine those talks with a military strike. The United States was again talking to the Iranians about the need to surrender, the need to create a peace deal, the need to go non-nuclear. And then out of the blue, essentially, came this attack. But also, if you have a look at the way that the United States did it, under the UN Charter, the United States, any country, has a right to self-defence. And the right to self-defence can be turned into a preemptive strike if that country feels that they are under an imminent and unavoidable threat of attack from another country. And if that is the case, that country then goes to calls a meeting of the UN Security Council and presents its evidence and gets essentially approval from the UN Security Council. And that's what happened in February 2003, prior to the Iraq War. Colin Powell took what he said was evidence that Saddam Hussein and Iraq were producing weapons of mass destruction. They had that meeting, and the US had already made its decision to go in, but it went through the process of presenting what was later found to be faulty intelligence to make the case and to have that UN Security Council meeting first. The United States did not do that this time. We have an emergency meeting of the Security Council being held now, but so Donald Trump has bypassed the UN Security Council, has also bypassed the US Congress, which wants a role in determining whether the United States gets involved in any future wars, and has, as I say, potentially severely damaged its standing as an honest broker in any negotiations for another Iran nuclear deal.
But the United States has used its justification to go in to target those sites because of the concern over Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities.
Exactly. So that is the argument that is being made. But it's important to, I think, to look at that and say, does that constitute evidence? Because on the other side, even Donald Trump's own Director of National Intelligence was saying as recently as March, and as far as we know, the assessment hasn't changed, that Iran was not on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon and that Iran's supreme leader had not ordered that Iran begin developing a nuclear weapon, and that, as I say, has not changed. So Donald Trump, when he was asked about that, said, they're wrong. My Director of National Intelligence is wrong, the intelligence community is wrong, but presented no argument or no evidence about why he thought they were wrong. So in this case, the evidence that exists, and there are serious questions. There are serious questions for Iran about why it has a stockpile of enriched uranium up to 60%. That is much closer to weapons grade than it is to domestic grade, which is around 3%. Why does Iran have that if it is not planning on building a nuclear weapon? We haven't had an answer to that. We didn't get an answer, or no one asked the question of the Iranian Foreign Minister when he spoke last night, Australian time. So I think, and we also had that recent finding by the Atomic Energy Agency that Iran was not in compliance with its obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, essentially that it wasn't being upfront and honest, according to weapons inspectors, about things that they were seeing and things that they had questions about. So that exists. Those are facts. What they are not is evidence that Iran was on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon and that using that evidence as a justification for why this should have been solved with a military strike rather than through continuing diplomatic efforts.